Because, like, I could imagine somebody saying that, like, they don't trust, like, a large government, they think there's too much, prone to tyranny or something like that, but also be supportive of an institution like the Catholic Church, which is literally, one guy who has a direct line to God.
Right, but they can't tax.
Well, I mean, there's...
And they don't have a military. And they can't conscript you.
True,
right?
Yeah.
And they can't throw you in jail.
That is true, yeah. I mean...
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all's good wherever you are. The clip you saw at the beginning of the video is witnessing intellectual homicide. S.D.N.Y got owned. Now, I just finished watching this podcast between JP and S.D.N.Y, who is supposed to be the great debater on the left. Now, I gotta say, no hate on S.D.N.Y. I gotta praise the guy for actually going down and sitting down with Jordan Peterson. But as I saw watching over 2 hours of this podcast, there's levels to this debate game, and S.D.N.Y is not on Jordan Peterson's left. Now, they covered a lot of stuff on this podcast. They covered government gigantism, the pandemic, climate change. They covered a lot. I'm mostly going to focus on the pandemic part. I picked a few clips that I really liked. I picked a few of the heated clips. The time codes are in the video. You can feel free to skip to wherever you want. I will give you my thoughts between the clips. I will try to set them up as best I can for y'all, but if you just want to watch the clips, feel free. The time codes are there for you. Now, one thing I did find about this podcast is that S.D.N.Y is actually a good debater. Now, I don't agree with his political views, but he is good at debating. But what I found annoying was I felt like at some point he knew he was wrong, and instead of saying that and maybe agreeing with Jordan Peterson on some point, I felt like he was more interested in winning the debate than finding the truth or seeking the truth, which was quite annoying. But by the end of the podcast, I felt like he was looking at Jordan Peterson more like a father figure than one of his peers. You could feel he was like a little bit deflated by the end of the podcast. Again, there's levels to this game, and S.D.N.Y is not on Jordan Peterson's level. Let's get into it.
That's another thing where I'm not sure if people actually care about gigantism or if they're using it as a proxy for other things that they don't like. Like, I could totally imagine a person...
I care about it.
Sure, yeah, you might. Yeah, sorry. It just mean in general.
That's
yeah.
okay.
Because, like, I could imagine somebody saying that, like, they don't trust, like, a large government, they think there's too much, prone to tyranny or something like that, but also be supportive of an institution like the Catholic Church, which is literally, one guy who has a direct line to God.
Right, but they can't tax.
Well, I mean, there's... And
they don't have a military.
And
they can't conscript you.
True,
right?
Yeah.
And they can't throw you in jail.
That is true, yeah. I mean...
Right. Well, those are major and significant. I mean, I get the overlap. Don't get me wrong.
Sure. But I'm saying, like, even if you had a local government, if you had a state government or a tribe, usually they've got some form of enacting punishment. It'll be sometimes more brutal, but they can throw you in jail. Conscription hasn't existed in the U.S. since the Vietnam War.
Yet.
I mean, yeah, true, yes.
Yeah, true.
So, yeah, I think that...
That was Jordan Peterson telling S.D.N.Y to go clean his room. Seriously, I worry for S.D.N.Y's mental health after watching just that little clip. It's like your dad giving you a spanking. That was a bad take. And you'll see this throughout this podcast, and I suggest you all go watch the whole thing. It is a good conversation, and it's actually really fun to see Jordan Peterson debate again. He must have absolutely loved this, but this was like gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. And this was a bad take, and obviously he was wrong here, but he was so concerned about winning the debate that he didn't win, instead of just saying, yeah, that might be right. Instead of just saying, yeah, I might have a bad take here. There's nothing bad about admitting that you're wrong. I'm wrong all the time about stuff. I have no problem admitting it. That's why I read a lot of books. I mean, there was a point in this podcast that S.D.N.Y claimed that there was only a few hundred migrants that entered the country. I very much enjoyed watching him get humbled here. Next clip we're going to watch is about the excess deaths in Europe post-pandemic, post-JAD, which according to Jordan Peterson, the excess deaths in Europe are up by 20% overall, across the board, since the end of the pandemic.
Right. Okay. Well, so one relatively straightforward hypothesis is that it's a consequence of the disruption of the healthcare system, the staving off of cancer treatment, etc., the increase in depression, anxiety, suicidality, and alcoholism that was a consequence of the lockdowns, the economic disruption. And there's plenty of reason to believe that some of that is the case. But the other obviously glaring possibility is that injecting billions of people with a vaccine that was not tested by any stretch of the imagination with the thoroughness that it should have before it was forced upon people also might be a contributing factor, partly because we know that it led to a rise in myocarditis among young men. And we also know that there was absolutely no reason whatsoever to ever recommend that that vaccine was delivered to young children. whose risk of death at COVID was so close to zero that it might as well have been zero.
When you're talking about a disease, the risk of death isn't the only thing that you worry about for the disease. There's also
so you're going to talk about transmission? Because that was another thing that the COVID vaccine pushed. Yeah, but it didn't do anything to transmission.
It absolutely did, because it decreased your chance of getting infected. It didn't get rid of transmission, but it reduced transmission.
Yeah, but it was claimed that it would get rid of
only
transmission.
If you take one reading of one single quote. I think that Biden said one time where he said, no, come on. I've heard so many times because everybody say, oh, you can't take anything Trump says seriously. Biden one time on the news says, if you get the vaccine, you won't transmit the disease.
That is so silly.
Which was it? No.
Do you know that our prime minister in Canada deprived Canadians of the right to travel for 6 months because the unvaccinated were going to transmit COVID with more likelihood than the vaccinated?
Some of these people are fools, man. For Destiny to think that it would have 0% impact is ludicrous. Now, Jordan Peterson lays it out for him, said, look, it could be many things. Alcoholism from the lockdown, people didn't get the care that they needed for their cancer, for whatever disease that they may have had, right? But at the same time, we did force people on the whole planet to take a vaccine that was not tested enough at a higher rate than we have ever had in history. And then they talk about transmission, and Destiny knows this. And he's saying, oh, no, nobody said. There's one quick little statement that Biden might have slipped up and said. No, Fauci was on the news almost daily saying this. Even people on the conservative side. I'll always remember Ben Shapiro saying, my wife's a doctor, you nut jobs. Go take the vaccine. It'll stop transmission. It wasn't just said one time out of the blue and people blew it up to something bigger than it was. This was being said everywhere. Take the vaccine. You're going to stop transmission. Now, the next little clip that we're going to watch is about Big Pharma and how during the pandemic, the left was very much on the side of Big Pharma, which surprised Jordan Peterson because historically, when you look at, the 60s and 70s and the hippies, they would have been the ones to be very skeptical of Big Pharma. And in this case, we're going to watch Destiny prove Jordan Peterson's point. Let's get back to it.
I told you at the beginning of this conversation that the progressive leftists were on the side of the pharmaceutical companies.
It's not about being on the side of the pharmaceutical companies. It's about
really,
yeah.
So what I see as the unholy part of that alliance with the pharmaceutical companies is that it dovetails with the radical utopians' willingness to use power to impose their utopian vision.
Well, then what do you make of the
otherwise,
fact
how
that
would you explain it? Because the leftists should have been the ones that were most skeptical about the bloody pharmaceutical companies. And they jumped on the vaccine bandwagon in exactly the same way that you're doing right now.
Pharmaceutical companies have helped us tremendously throughout the...
Right, there we go. Fine. No,
I don't think
so. No, I don't think so.
You're just wrong.
I think they're utterly wrong. I see. So you don't think that the pharmaceutical companies who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt?
I don't. Corrupt is a very broad.
No. It's.
Do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence?
Do you think
willing to extract money out of people by putting their health on the line? You don't believe that?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Okay. Do you think that any vaccines work?
Yes.
Do you think that any?
I don't think 80 of them work at once for babies. I think that's a little risky.
But yet we've been on this vaccine schedule for how many decades?
Like this, not like this, not carefully.
I had a ton of vaccines when I was a child. I'm pretty sure that was the norm for people. There were a ton of vaccines you had to take.
There's way more now.
Where do you think the mRNA vaccine, the speeding up of it came from? How do you make for the fact that it was Donald Trump that did warp speed?
Terror. Foolish panicking, just like we're doing with the climate issue.
And Destiny just really proved this point, saying pharmaceutical companies have helped us tremendously. This is Destiny getting proper cooked here. What Jordan Peterson is saying about terror being one of the big reasons, I agree with that. People were scared because the media and a lot of these doctors and quote-unquote professionals were scaring people. More than they should have. Destiny was trying to paint Jordan Peterson as somebody who doesn't believe in any pharmaceuticals or any vaccine, and that's not the case. What he's clearly laying out is that, one, for babies, you don't need 80 at a time. That is crazy. And we're giving them more and more. And a lot of these vaccines and medications that we're given to people are not tested enough. Sure, some vaccines work. It's the same way some medications work, right? There's a lot of medications that people take all the time, right? Diabetes medication, insulin, metformin. We have decades of data on this stuff. We know it's pretty safe. B's and ACE inhibitors for people that have either heart disease or high blood pressure. We have 30 years of data and research on these medications. We know what the side effects are. We know what the benefits are. That's why a lot of people are fine with taking them. But how many vaccines do you see go to market and then get off market within a year or two because they haven't been tested enough?
We did it on a scale and at a rate during the COVID pandemic, so-called pandemic, that was unparalleled. And the consequence of that was that we injected billions of people with an experimental, and it wasn't a bloody vaccine.
Of course
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It's
What,
not.
because it have a 100% success rate? You think it's a definition of vaccine? The whole point of the vaccine is to give your body a protein to train on so that your immune system works in the future. Who cares if it's not the same? There's different
They
types
used the word
of...
vaccine so that they didn't have to contend with the fact that it wasn't the same technology.
There are different types of vaccines
There certainly are.
that are different technologies.
Fine.
The mRNA vaccines is a type
This
of
used
vaccine
to be
technology.
vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this and now it's like this.
No. It was like this and now it's like this. The mRNA technology was a radical, qualitative leap forward in technology. You can call it a vaccine if you want to, but it bears very little resemblance to any vaccine that went before that. And the reason it was called a vaccine was because vaccine was a brand name that had a track record of safety, and shoehorning it in that was one of the ways to make sure that people weren't terrified of the technology. And
I think the reason it's called a vaccine is because they're injecting you with something that's inoculating you against something in the future because it is...
There's more negative side effects reported from the mRNA vaccines than there were reported for every single vaccine ever created since the dawn of time, and not by a small margin. So it's not just the excess deaths.
I agree.
It's the Vaers data.
What is Vaers data?
It's the database that until the COVID-19 pandemic emerged, and we had the unfortunate consequence that there were so many side effects being reported, it was the gold standard for determining whether or not vaccines were safe. And now, as soon as it started to misbehave on the mRNA vaccine front, we decided that we were going to doubt the validity of the Vaers reporting system.
Okay, the Vaers...
I miss this side. I can imagine that this was really fun for him personally. He can't go on mainstream media anymore because everybody just tries to get a gotcha moment out of him. Nobody wants to debate the guy because a lot of these people that he would be debating would be professors, academics, don't want to look bad because they have books to sell. But man, S.D.N.Y knows this stuff. This is why I think he's just so worried about losing the debate that he's not actually searching for truth, which really he should be doing. He knows that mRNA was a new technology. How can you not know that? Even the normies in society know that. Now, in this last clip that I'm going to show you, this is where they really get into the debating the Vaers reporting system. And also on the topic of trusting third parties. And S.D.N.Y gets absolutely destroyed here.
System.
Okay, the Vaers reporting system never been the gold standard for anything. Vaers reporting is just if you want to report that there is some issue that you have after getting a vaccine. That's it. I think it's vaccine adverse.
What the hell do you think it was set up for?
To report adverse events that happen after a vaccine.
Why?
To track and see if something was related to the vaccine.
Right.
So
Why?
most people didn't even know Vaers existed until after the COVID vaccine. Once people know that it exists, of course more people are going to engage with it. But what happens
So
when
it's
you submit
all
a
noise.
report? No, well, it could be or it couldn't be. So what do? When a bunch of stuff
Well, you first of all might begin by suggesting that maybe it's not all noise.
Correct. So when
Especially
all
given
of
the
these
excess
things are
deaths.
admitted to Vaers, what they do is, from there, they investigate. All you can do, all Vaers is I might go and get a vaccine, and maybe in 3 days I go, I got a headache. I'm going to go ahead and call my doctor and make this report. And they'll say, okay, well, it's an adverse event after vaccine. It doesn't mean the vaccine caused the headache. And now that more people know about this system than ever.
I'm saying
I'm
that
just
the
saying that
Vaers
Vaers is
system
not
was
the gold standard of determining if a vaccine is working or not.
What?
Compared to actual longitudinal, perspective, randomized controlled trial
You
studies.
mean like the ones they should have done to the goddamn vaccines?
Like the ones that they did do for the vaccines and they continue to do to this day. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
You really
correct.
think that you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of the trials for the vaccines, do you?
No,
Really?
I don't. So I have to trust.
Then what are you
I
doing?
have to do.
I don't trust them. I looked at the bloody data.
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent. When you go outside,
I don't have to trust.
Of course you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you hope your engine doesn't explode. When you're drinking water, you hope that the public water or whatever tap or bottled water you got it out of isn't contaminated or poisoned with cholera.
I don't
when
do
you
that as a consequence of consensus.
No, you of course you do.
No, I don't. I do that as a consequence of observing multiple times that when I put the goddamn key in the ignition, the truck started.
Why do you know it's going to start the 50th or the 100th time? How
Don't
many times
play
do you wear
Hume
the...
with me.
I'm
You know
not
perfectly
playing
well
Hume.
why.
You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream. To some extent, we trust. We have to trust third-party institutions to make
Except when they
determination.
use force. How about that?
Especially when they use force. We trust the police officers. We trust the judicial systems.
We on the left trust the police, do we?
To some extent, do we? If somebody's breaking into your house, who do you call?
them.
I loved this podcast. They cover a lot of topics from climate to government, tons of stuff. I suggest you all go check it out. Sorry I had to pause it and the clips were short, but I was chopping up a over 2-hour podcast trying to give you guys just the cherry-picked sections that I thought were really fun and that you all would enjoy as well. As much as I disagree with S.D.N.Y politically, I do hope that in the future we get to see more of these types of conversation. Maybe not with him, but with other people on the opposite side willing to go, and not just with Jordan Peterson, but with other conservatives. We need more of this. Just getting a bunch of people in a room also with different points of view from different parts of the country would be tremendous. Everybody's so divided right now, and the people on S.D.N.Y's side of the aisle don't want to talk to anybody. They just want to censor and censor, and you're not going to get anywhere with that. Yes, this conversation got heated, but at the same time, they agreed on a few things. And this was not meant to be a productive conversation where they would find common ground. It was just like a small debate. But when you get these conversations and people can watch them, this is where you can sway somebody's opinion. Somebody who might be more on the left, following S.D.N.Y, might watch this and think, I think Jordan Peterson had some good points. You don't ever want to be too far gone to your one side that you're not willing to listen to the other side. And this is why I said a lot of you are going to disagree with me. I think S.D.N.Y, he's definitely a lefty. But he's not the most far-left person out there. I've listened to Hassan Piker try to debate people. That guy's pro-terrorism. Cenk or Sank or the Young Turks, they're way more far-left than this guy. But at that point, even then, I would love to see one of the Young Turks with Jordan Peterson having a convo. I've seen, but I'll give it to Cenk, though, of the Young Turks. He does go out there and he does debate people. He does have the conversation. Again, that's somebody I don't agree with politically. But I gotta praise the people that do this because I want more of this. Because there's a lot of people out there, I think, that either don't know what the other side stands for or they're maybe in the middle, could easily be swayed one way or the other. Anyways, I really enjoyed this podcast. Say it one more time. If you guys like this video, smash that thumbs up button. Consider subscribing to the channel, help it grow. Catch you all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.